if you're just starting the journey, I want you to start with some of the easier to create, less involved lead magnet styles. I don't want you to spend 3 months developing a lead magnet early on when you have no idea whether people are going to want it or not. That is not a good use of your time. So you want to make sure that you're, creating stuff where you can, create new, try new things, make changes, adjust, and see what works. Welcome to the Certified Badass Online Marketing Podcast, where being a badass has less to do with what you wear and what music you listen to, and everything to do with whether you've got the thriving online business of your dreams. I'm your renegade thinking Harvard Law grad turned online entrepreneur host, Bobby Klink. In my years building my thriving business, the most important lesson I've learned is that being a badass online marketer isn't about secret strategies or ninja tactics. It's about doing the basic stuff right and showing the F up. So each week here on the show, you'll get clear, easy to execute guidance on how to build your online business and a swift kick in the ass or two to make sure you're getting it done. Hey there, welcome to episode 213 of the Certified Badass Online Marketing Podcast. I'm your host, Bobby Klink, and I'm excited for today's episode because we're continuing our series, The Inbound Journey. And specifically, we're continuing the part of this series where we're talking about list building. Now, if you haven't paid attention the last couple of weeks, we started a series back in episode 211 that I'm calling The Inbound Journey, which is about kind of the nuts and bolts of inbound marketing and how we need to think about things like list building, email marketing, content marketing, social media marketing, all as one big ecosystem, and kind of stop thinking about, these things in silos and as individual strategies, but think about them as an overall kind of, journey we're taking people on. And also to think like inbound marketers. So that's what the series is about. And this episode, like I said, is the second episode in the list building piece. I started with list building because it's something that a lot of people want to hear about, want to talk about, etc. And so we're starting there. Last week, we covered the topic of, kind of the basics, like looking at the overview, looking at how you need to approach things, looking at the most important rule for list building, all of those types of things we covered last week. So think of last week as kind of hey, let's get started. Let's make sure we have our footing. Now, this week, we're diving into what makes a great lead magnet. Because if you want to build your email list, you need a stellar lead magnet, something that your core audience will gladly say, you can have my email address in exchange for that. So you have to figure that out. But the problem is when I talk to a lot of people, they struggle with this. They struggle with figuring out what makes a good lead magnet. And I'm not going to tell you that there is an exact science here. There's not. But what I'm going to try to do in this episode is take the guesswork out as much as possible, but help you understand that there is going to be some experimentation. There's going to be some play and trying different things and seeing what works. But the goal here is to give you the best chance for success. So that's what we're going to be diving into in this week's episode. Now, before we dive in, though, if you want to go deeper with list building, but with marketing, with all of the stuff we're talking about here, I'd love to have you sign up for my totally free program, Badass Online Marketing University. It is a university full of courses that are about the things you need to know as an online marketer. And these are not junk courses. They're courses that, are as good or better than what courses you've probably paid for. We took one of my paid courses about email marketing, put it in there and made it free, but we're taking the same level of care that we would in creating a paid offer and putting it into BOMU. We're doing that because we made the decision that we don't want to charge people for training, for information. And so that's what we're creating. You can sign up at bobbyklink.com/BOMU, B-O-M-U. And just so you know, as I'm recording this, I am almost finished up with creating the list building course that will actually be part of BOMU. So we will have an entire course, an entire online course that really rivals a lot of paid courses that I've taken about list building in there for free. So you can sign up bobbyklink.com/BOMU. Now with that, let's kind of dive into lead magnets. And what we're going to talk about kind of, three big things we're going to talk about during this episode. First, what makes a great lead magnet generally? Like, what are the attributes? How do you think about what a lead magnet should be? The second is, how many lead magnets should you have? Should you have one? Should you have two? Should you have 27? We'll talk about that. And again, I'm not going to give you an exact number, but we'll talk about how to think about that. And then finally, we're going to talk about picking the right kind of lead magnet for your audience. And we'll go through each of the different kinds and, think through, where they fit, how you might use them and why they might be a good fit for you and your audience. So that's the agenda. Let's start with that first issue. What makes a great lead magnet? Now, the first thing we got to talk about is your lead magnet needs to speak to your people. What I talked about last week in kind of last week's episode, part of what we talked about is that you need to understand your niche and the people in your niche at a deep level so you understand their struggles, understand their problems, because building a list is largely about speaking to that. So if you haven't checked that episode out, go back and check that episode out. But the first piece that you simply have to get is that your lead magnet has to be something that your people want. That should be obvious, and I hope it is, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that. But what I want you to get here is this isn't or shouldn't be about you guessing and saying, well, I don't know, I would like this lead magnet, so I think my people would. This should be based on you doing market research, you actually talking and hearing from people in your audience about what they would want, about what they would like, and creating something that will help them. Now, there are limits here. What I mean is I don't want you to create something that your people want if you think it's a bad idea. I've talked about this for a long time. I refuse to create email templates, which is what people want, because I don't believe that email marketing can be templated. I can't give you a fill-in-the-blank Mad Libs version of email and expect it to perform well. So I don't do that because I think that's disserving my audience. But we do say, okay, well, what kind of things do they like? What kind of, freebies would people be interested in? And that's kind of how we think about it. We think about it from the perspective of the feedback we're hearing from our audience, not us just kind of saying, well, I think I'd like this, so I'm going to create it. So you've got to have that understanding of your people so that you know that what you're creating will speak to them. We're not going to go through the entire creation process, but one idea that you could employ is literally when you have an idea, go in and survey an audience, like find your people who are already in your world and ask in groups that you're an active participant in, and get people's thoughts before you create it, just to make sure that it's something people would be interested in. So that's one way to do it. But the point and the big thing is that your lead magnet needs to be something that your people want, and that you know that based on kind of a deep understanding of who they are, what their struggles are, and kind of how they're looking for solutions. So that's the first piece. Now, the next piece, though, is that, let's talk about some attributes of a great lead magnet. And one of the things that people are wondering is kind of, this fits into the different kinds of lead magnets. We'll talk about those specifically later, but generally you need to create lead magnets that will somehow help your people move forward. And move forward here is it needs to help them move forward on their journey to solve the problem that you ultimately help them solve. This can be done in a lot of ways. And to be clear, it doesn't mean necessarily always that it's solving the specific problem that your paid offer is about. That's not the case. In last week's episode, I talked that, for example, your lead magnet might be about knocking down some kind of obstacle that is in their way, or giving them kind of prerequisite knowledge that they need before your paid offer makes sense. So it doesn't have to be something directly related to what you charge for, but it has to be something that will move them forward on a journey from where they are to having solved their problems. So that needs to be what it does. And like I said, there's a few different ways to do that. The one way is to help them knock down an obstacle, right? So find some obstacle, something that is in their way, and help them get over that piece. Help them stop struggling with that issue. So that's one way to do it. Another way to do it would be to give them some how-to knowledge. Like, it's not an obstacle, but it's just helping them move forward, helping them take an affirmative step towards, solving their problem. So it could be some kind of actionable how-to guide. Another approach, and this one is not going to be used as much, and we'll talk about this in a second, is you could deepen their awareness and their knowledge. And I want you to understand these types of freebies, it needs to be specific, right? It needs to be something that you're using very sparingly, and you know you're doing it when I'm saying that it's about awareness, about knowledge, about information. And we'll talk about that here, because what I want you to get is that generally, actionable freebies are better. In other words, some kind of freebie that will help people take action is the better option 9 times out of 10. I mean, I don't have an exact number here, but most times you want something that people can take action on, not something that is simply giving them information. So an informational freebie that is just information, that doesn't provide any kind of, insights into how to do anything or help people start to take action, is not going to be as good. There are exceptions, and we're going to talk about specific cases when we get to the kind of like the different types of freebies where you might create white papers and ebooks that are more information based, but those are going to be very specific to your audience. And you should only create those if you are sure and really have confidence that your people want to learn information, that's a big part of what they want, that they need to learn information. And if you think about it, for some people, for some audiences, learning information or not having the information, not having learned the information could be an obstacle that stops them from taking action. It could be like, hey, this is a very cautious group as kind of a group, as a niche. They will not take action until they have all the information. If that fits, then kind of informational freebies are, in a sense, something that helps you overcome an obstacle, and they're not as actionable. But that's the kind of thing I want you thinking. And I want you to understand this, though. For 90% of you people listening to this podcast, you should be creating freebies that are more about helping people take action and less about giving them information. So they are action-based, not information-based in almost every case, with these rare exceptions. Now, the next thing I want to take up, though, is like, how big does a freebie need to be? The normal advice that you'll hear from people is that your freebie should provide a quick win. And this is generally good advice, right? I mean, freebies that provide a quick win are consumable like easily. People can kind of get them, and, it immediately gives them that, I don't know if it's a dopamine or what hit it is, but, they can take action, get an immediate win very quickly. And then that gives them this kind of response that's like, hey, this is cool. I like it, And the other reason why these smaller quick win freebies are good is because they are a smaller commitment from people to join your list. What I want you to get is that when someone is signing up for a freebie, depending on the person, yes, they don't have to pay money, but they're looking at it and saying there is a time commitment involved. Will this be worth my time? Is a question that some people will be asking. And so you have to think about that from a perspective of really understanding, is this something, they're going to want to do? This is why a quick win type of freebie, like a 2-page checklist or something, why those can be so popular. Because if you think about it, someone who doesn't yet know you or hasn't really kind of gotten to know you very well can say, hey, I can do this, and it's 5 minutes of my time. If it works out, great. If it doesn't, no big deal. That's not a big deal. So that's another reason why these kind of smaller quick win freebies will often be the good way to go and the right way to go. It is easier to have people say, yes, I want that, than bigger freebies. But I want you to understand, sometimes longer, bigger freebies are better. They're better because you're being honest with people. And by better, I don't mean necessarily that you're going to get more leads or get leads more cheaply, but you might get better leads. And what I'm talking about is, like, if you're, for example, a coach who works with people one-on-one, you're not looking for an email list with 10,000 people on it. Now, maybe one day you'll do that and you'll create a scaled group program. But right now, you're looking for action takers who are willing to commit and invest in themselves, because your offer is going to be higher priced because it's direct work with them, and they've got to be willing to do the work. If they're looking for a quick fix and you're a coach, that's not going to work. So if that's you, in some sense, having a freebie that requires someone to make a commitment to themselves as part of even getting on your list and getting value could have value in itself, right? Because it weeds out the people who won't take action. Now, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with freebie, seekers and tire kickers and all that, but as well as I do, again, the coaches out here are saying and nodding their head hopefully at this, that for you to be able to succeed working with someone, they're going to have to be willing to put in the work. And so having freebies that require them to do that are longer, that take some kind of commitment, will give you a more qualified pool of leads that you're talking to. You can kind of assume, hey, anyone who signed up for this thing, they're willing to invest. They're willing to put in the time. They're willing to do the work. And so you can kind of just have that assumption then when you're talking to the people on your list. So that can be a benefit. Now, the other way is, let's be honest, if you have a bigger freebie, it is a much better way to really help deepen people's understanding of a topic. If you go with a video course or something like that, and I'm not talking about something as grand as Badass Online Marketing University, not a lot of people are going to be as crazy as me and do that whole thing. But I'm saying if you did, a mini course that's 10 lessons, let's just be clear, you'll be able to deliver a lot more value and help people take bigger action through that kind of freebie than you would through a 1 or 2 page, PDF guide. So sometimes you're just going to decide that, hey, I'm willing, to not get as many leads because I want to get the better leads who are willing to sign up for this bigger freebie. So that's kind of the trade-off that I want you to get. But what I want you to understand is that saying, well, I have a 100-page ebook isn't going to be something that people are like, ooh, that's going to make it better than like a 10-page guide. Most people are actually looking for the 10-page guide, just so you know. They're not looking for 100 pages, 200 pages, because they don't want to commit that kind of time. So I want you to get that concept and understand if you're going with the bigger ones, you're doing it for a reason, not because you think bigger is what people want, or kind of, a longer guide, a more involved guide is what people want. It usually isn't. So those are kind of, in a nutshell, what makes for a great lead magnet. It's got to speak to your people. It's got to address kind of where they are and kind of be tailored to what they actually want. It needs to move them forward in their journey somehow, knocking down barriers or knocking down obstacles, helping them take action, something like that. Generally actionable is better than information-based, with the small caveat. And, generally smaller wins will perform better, but you could use a bigger type of freebie, a more involved freebie, if you're trying to really qualify people and give them a deeper understanding. So those are the contours of that. Now I want to move to the second point, which is how many lead magnets should you have? And this is where I've got to give you kind of some of that tough love, because a lot of people who are list building are like, okay, I just got to create a freebie. I got to create a lead magnet. And that's great. You do. But what I want you to get is you're going to create more than one. You're going to create a lot of freebies during your life cycle as an online entrepreneur. Now, part of it is that, quite honestly, the chances that you're actually going to nail the right lead magnet out of the gate are pretty darn small, because when you're starting out, you're not going to know your people well enough. You won't have gotten enough feedback from them. Yes, maybe you had conversations, but you haven't had to have like the rubber meet the road of people having to give you their email address in exchange for the thing you want. And so until you do that, you're not going to be in a position to really know what, people are doing and how, what they actually want and how you can best solve it. So you're going to play with things. I mean, I know, like in my legal stuff of my business, I don't even know all of the different things I went through. I had a legal checklist. I had a stock image guide. I had a guide for podcasters. I had a bunch of different stuff. And I finally found one that was really kind of a winner, which was, it was a guide about the legal stuff for your website. That was kind of the one that I finally found was, a lot of people want that, because it's like an entry point. It was like helping them understand at a very entry level, what do they need to address their kind of the legal stuff. And so that was kind of my first one. And it was at least 8 or 9 months into my journey of trying different things before I found what really seemed to be resonating and clicking with people. And then ultimately I changed it to a different one later. But I tell you that so that you have a sense that there is a learning process involved, and you should be willing to try different things out to see what seems to be working. And, then if it's not, try something new and just play with these things. This is why one of the things I'll talk about later when we talk about picking the right kind of lead magnet, if you're just starting the journey, I want you to start with some of the easier to create, less involved lead magnet styles. And we'll talk about what those are in a second. But I don't want you to spend 3 months developing a lead magnet early on when you have no idea whether people are going to want it or not. That is not a good use of your time. So you want to make sure that you're, creating stuff where you can, create new, try new things, make changes, adjust, and see what works. So that's what I want you to be thinking about kind of as the first piece. But that's not really about how many lead magnets you need. That's about, how many you're going to have to try before you get to the right one, that's a different question. But now let's talk about this separate issue, which is simply that you're not going to have one lead magnet. Even if you have one core business, you probably are going to have multiple lead magnets that serve that audience. And I'm not even talking here about like my world where it's more complicated because I've got the legal stuff and then I've got the marketing stuff. So I have like two completely different businesses in a sense, right? And so that's kind of, something that complicates things in and of itself. But separate from that, I want you to understand that your people are not all struggling with the same thing. They're at different stages of their journey. So, for example, people here listening to my podcast in my world, some of them are just starting out in their online business building. Some of them, are a ways in, but are still struggling to make it successful. And then I've got some who are successful and who, have successful businesses, but are looking to scale. Well, if you think about it, attracting those people, I'm going to attract those people in different ways because they have different obstacles. The things that they need to solve right now are different. And so having different lead magnets that help people at different stages of their journey will be helpful. The other thing I want you to understand, though, is that it's not just the journey. It could be like different subject matter. So since I help people with marketing, there's some people who are most interested and will be most attracted to my email stuff. There's other people who will want to hear about content marketing. There's other people who will want to hear, about all kinds of like little nuances of things that I do in my business, of team building. That's another one. You can think of all these different things. And you don't have to create freebies for all of those things, but if there are different issues, kind of different strands of things you can help people with, you can probably guess that having freebies that address different ones that essentially have a broader, wider net to catch people who would still all be interested in your product is helpful, is useful. It's something that you'll want over time. So that's the kind of stuff that I want you thinking about. So it's partly about helping people at different stages in their journey. It's partly about helping people with kind of different problems or different struggles or different topics in your bigger realm. And then another thing I want you to understand is that people don't all consume content in the same way. So this is kind of a more advanced thing that I want you to think about, but some people prefer audio content. Some people would prefer a simple PDF because it's quicker. And you have to understand, it's not that one is right and one is wrong. It's that people think differently. And so having lead magnets that will serve people no matter how they prefer to consume content is useful. And again, it's not small because we have a very, big involved freebie with BOMU, but in BOMU, we have the video courses, but we also have each course you can download as a private podcast feed. So you can binge all of the lessons in audio, in your headphones while you're going about your day. And that's part of me recognizing some of my people are not in a position where they can or want to sit in front of a computer to consume this content. Some people do, right? Some people want that focused attention. Other people would prefer to have it in their ears while they're doing other things. So again, that's part of me saying, okay, hey, in this case, it's one freebie, but delivered in different ways to serve people. But it might be that you have video lessons and then separately you have a PDF guide so people can get. all of those things can help. The idea here is to think about how are the different ways you can reach your audience, help them with, people at different steps, and then help them with different problems. Now, I don't want this to sound overwhelming. You're always going to start with one freebie, okay? And I don't believe, and I don't think that it's worth your time, for example, to create a specific freebie for every piece of content you create. That used to be something that people suggested. If you had a podcast, you're going to have a freebie for each and every podcast episode. What I'll tell you is if you get to the point that you have 10,000 people or more consuming each piece of your content, it might be worthwhile. But also, I'm going to tell you, chances are you don't need a different freebie for each piece of content. Maybe if you talk about 5 different big topics, you could have 5 freebies, right? You could have 5 different freebies that people can sign up for. That will evolve over time, but start with one and then figure out, okay, what is the gap? Is there a way that I could do this? And oftentimes the easiest way to have multiple freebies will be to start with one and then repurpose that into another medium. So maybe, one of them is you have a guide and then you create, an audio, mini course or something that people can get instead. So it's the same content delivered in 2 different mediums. That's the quickest way. But then maybe you'll later say, okay, I need to address this other problem. And so you'll expand over time. Now, I don't want you to be thinking I've got 100 different freebies and I've got to manage all that. Don't do that, because if you overcomplicate it, it doesn't work. But I think most businesses will end up having, a half dozen to a dozen freebies. There will be a couple that are the ones that most people sign up for, but having the variety will actually serve you well over time. So that's the question of how many freebies or how many lead magnets should you have. Now let's go into the final question, which is kind of talking about the different types of lead magnets, because I want you to understand their different types and walk through it. And the key kind of takeaway here that I want you to get is that there is no one right kind of lead magnet. You will hear people say, oh, well, a checklist is the best way, or oh, a quiz is the best way. And so I want you to understand that's not true. Now, I'm not saying that they're wrong. Maybe a quiz was best for them. Maybe a checklist was best for them. But there is no one right way. You have to understand your people. This goes back to kind of the first piece we were talking about, which is understand, what kind of people you're marketing to, what are they looking for, how do they like stuff, and what is the issue that they really want solved. And that will affect your kind of freebie. So if the people that you are marketing to are really strapped for time, that's going to tell you need to create one of the freebies that is simple, easy to consume, and or will make their lives easier, right? So it will, save them time or something else, right? That's one group of people. Then you have other people, maybe you're someone who, your audience, they are learners. They're people who want all the information. They want to go deep on a subject. And, I talked about this in kind of, information-based versus action-based. There are some people who it's they want all the information before they're willing to take action. And if that's the case, maybe you need to have that. Now, I don't want you, because maybe you like that, thinking that your people automatically do. I'm talking about there would be very specific niches maybe where that's the case, where you're dealing with people who are very cautious as a group and want information before they make decisions. That might be a case where that's the case. Now, another thing that you might ask is, are these people interested in self-discovery or not? And we'll get to this when we talk about quizzes. Quizzes only work if people, what they really want is some self-discovery, to know something about themselves. And so we'll talk about that in a bit. But then you might have people who, you might have an audience where the people are, I would say they're, just the facts, no nonsense kind of people. They don't want fluff. They don't want anything else. They're hey, just give me what I need and get me the quickest results possible. Again, you have to understand your audience and understand what they want to assess the type of freebie that's likely to work best. So that's the concept here. And don't get sucked into anyone who's telling you that any particular type of freebie is the best. There is no the best. It's different things and different strokes for different folks. You'll have to try it out and see what works. Now with that, let's kind of go through different types. The first type of freebie, I'm grouping a couple together here. I'm going to call them checklists and guides, but think of these as short like PDF type of freebies that, these are the quintessential quick win. So it's things that, I had one, which was like the stock image guide. It was actually a guide and a checklist. It was the 3 things you need, in a license. So that was the guide part, teaching them the stuff they needed in a license for stock image sites. And then it had a list. So I don't know if that's a checklist or what, but, a list of sites they could use. So that was a very simple, I think it was 3 pages long or something. It gave them the information, gave them a resource they could take action on, etc. Now, these are the most common form of freebie. They are the easiest to create because, again, there's not a ton of information in them. Now, I want you to use care and make sure that you're actually providing value, that you're not just, throwing together a piece of junk. No, it's got to be valuable, but they don't need to be 20, 30, 40, 50 pages long. So they're a very good starting point for most people. So most people should start by creating a checklist or a guide because they're easy to create. They're easily consumable. It gives people a starting point. Plus, as I talked about, you're often going to have to create multiple freebies, so you don't want to start by creating a very involved one that you don't know if it's going to work. So these can be a very good type. Now, most every entrepreneur will have at least one of these types of freebies, checklists, or guides in their repertoire of lead magnets over time. You're going to have some of these because they are very good for the quick wins, for the it's the snack size stuff for people who are like, let me try this person out. And so they're good for that. And then those people may go deeper after, like, well, this person knows what they're talking about. So maybe I'll, consume some of their other freebies, consume some of their other content and go from there. So they're that very kind of easy for people who want to dip their toe in the water of your world. So that's why you're going to have it. Now, I'm not going to go too much into how to create these. I will simply say that they should be clean and readable. Do not let design get in the way of the information. Also, when you're creating these, think about the fact that people may want to print them. Not everyone, but someone may want to print them. So often a lighter background that's not going to take a ton of ink, and just think about how they'll work there. These can be designed in Canva. I mean, you could hire someone to do it, but they can be designed in Canva. We actually recommend templates put together by my friend Patrick Sesko to start with the design. We've got a link in the show notes where you can go, you can purchase. He's got a pack that it's called his lead magnet pack, and it's got, I don't know how many different pages, but it's got a lot of different page types, and you just edit it in Canva. There's directions on how to do it. It makes it very simple for you, so you can have templates, or you can have a checklist, a guide, a freebie, a PDF freebie that looks professionally made, but you made it yourself, so you don't have to pay for a professional. So we've got a link in the show notes. And if you don't know, Patrick is the person who helped us conceptualize kind of our visual rebrand, where we added in the teal, added in the purple, added in the yellow as part of our brand, and kind of changed the look and feel. I guess it's been about a year ago that we started that process, but so he's someone that we trust, and he's got these templates. So we have a link that'll make it very simple. But the point here is keep it simple. Don't let any kind of design elements get in the way of people getting the information with checklists and guides, because they are meant to be quick, easy wins. The next type of freebie I want to talk about are templates. And it's kind of ironic. When I was putting together the outline for this episode, I first forgot templates, which is funny because my core lead magnet on the legal stuff side is a template. I give away my privacy policy template. We've got a link to it in the show notes if you don't have it. It's like the one legal policy you need for your website, and we give away the template. And that's been my core lead magnet, I guess, since about March or April of 2019. And the reason why templates are great is because, like, they are, they're things that people can execute quickly. They solve a problem. They really are that quick win, and it serves the crap out of people. And so that kind of success breeds trust in people. It will help people say, hey, this person really helped me solve a problem. And again, it's a lower barrier to get people on your list with them, because people are like, well, this is actually going to save me time. It's not going to take me time. So you get rid of the time investment piece if you create a good template. Now, I want to give a caveat here, though. Don't go creating a template for the sake of creating a template because I'm saying they can be great freebies. Only do it if it's something that should be templated. So only do it if it's something that, first of all, can be templated. If it, like I gave the example, I refuse to do email templates because I don't believe that you can template out successful emails. I can give you frameworks, but I can't give you a template. And so don't create a template simply for the sake of doing it. Where they tend to work is where people need to do stuff. So like if you have anything to do with finance or any of those things, you could do it. Anything where people are having to calculate and do those things, you could do like a Google Sheet template that helps them do that. You'll see this all the time. People will have like ad cost calculators. They will have all of those different things that you can get that are templated, and it's just built to do those things. Those kinds of templates can work very well. But again, don't create a template for the sake of creating a template. Oftentimes, what will be best is if it's something you actually use in your business. Like if there's something that you actually use in your business, in your life, in something like that, and you can make it public and give people access to it, that's where they tend to work great. So those are templates. Now, again, I can't really tell you how to design those because they'll be in all different ways. Like, our legal policy templates, they start as Google Docs. Very soon, we will have generators where people can, kind of generate the things, but then it might be a Google Sheet. It might be all kinds of different things, but you get the point. Templates can be anything. Just keep them simple. And again, that's what I do want to say. For it to be a good template, it should be something that is either self-explanatory or comes with the explanation. So make sure that it's easy to use because that's the value that they come. Okay, the next type or category of freebie that I want to talk about, again, I'm going to group two together, white papers and ebooks. Think of these as more involved, more in-depth PDFs of some sort. These can be very helpful for establishing thought leadership. They build credibility, like is what they're doing. They're building your credibility and can also help you build your list at the same time. They are great if your audience is full of learners. But what I'll tell you is oftentimes the content of these should be, in my view, content that you have available for free on a blog. But if you have a blog post that's 8,000, 10,000 words long, something like that, you might as well create a downloadable version of it too that people can sign up for, because someone isn't going to retain everything in a 10,000 word blog post. So they're going to want a written guide to take with them, if you will. So that's the kind of thing that I think you can think about when you're putting together these big, epic pieces of content. These are things that you should put some real work into. It's not just slapping together a bunch of information. You should do some research. You should make sure that they're comprehensive. Now, they're never going to be complete, but make it so that they appear like well thought out, well researched, well kind of put together pieces of content. These will be judged on their quality, so make sure that they are high quality. I've downloaded an ebook that it actually the quality of it was so bad that it made me distrust the person. I said, well, this person clearly just slapped this together, and it diminished any level of authority that person otherwise would have had. So don't do that. Again, maybe I'm overly critical of things, but you will have people out there. And if you put together something that you're calling an ebook or you're calling a white paper, and then it's just kind of a piece of junk, people are going to judge you. So make sure that these are higher quality. Now, as with other PDF guides, design should be simple. Don't let the design distract from what you're doing generally. I want you to be thinking just, hey, keep it simple, make it readable, add little bits of design just to add a little flair so they're not just looking at, white on white, or just kind of white on everything with no design element. But just a little bit of design element here goes a long way. And again, the paper should generally be white, but you could have little flares here and there of outlines or things like that. So those are white papers and ebooks. The next group I want to talk about are audio or video mini courses. Now, I'm not even going to cover like comprehensive courses or comprehensive academies like I have, but you could definitely do a mini course via video or audio. This is something that a lot of people will do, and a lot of people have had big success with them. Now, these are bigger value, but bigger commitment, right? There's no question you can provide more value, in my mind, at least in a mini course than you could in a PDF guide, because You'll have more time, even if you're doing, 5 videos and they're 5 to 10 minutes each. I mean, that's 25 or more minutes of time that you're able to communicate with them via video or audio. So you're just going to be able to get more information to them. I also personally believe they can be better organized, like breaking it up into chunks of here's lesson 1, here's lesson 2, here's lesson 3 will make it, kind of more consumable and helps to do that. Part of that is it will help you to organize it in your mind as well. Another piece is you could give people homework. You could literally at the end of lesson 1 say, now before you move on to, lesson 2, go do X. Now, is everybody going to do that? No, but some people will, and that will help them take action and kind of, then it's not just one piece of action. You can break action down into a daily action or something like that will help them over time. So they can be way more valuable, but it's going to require more work from your audience, right? They're going to have to commit to watch multiple videos or listen to multiple audio pieces. A lot of people aren't going to sign up for these because they don't want that time commitment. We already talked about this. And what I'll tell you also is of the people who sign up, there will be a good number who never actually use them because they'll sign up and they're not motivated, so they're not going to take action. That's the nature of the beast. But what I'll tell you is this is where you're making that trade-off. Is this a better way to actually deliver the information to the right people? And if so, it can be a useful thing. And I tend to think that these can be particularly valuable for people who are selling higher ticket items. Like I talked about earlier with coaches, part of what you're trying to do is weed out people who won't take action, and people who will sign up for one of these are more likely to be action takers. Another important piece that why these can be valuable is people are going to get a taste of what you're like. If your paid product is either, working one-on-one with you or very much you teaching in the same style of one of these courses, them getting a taste of what it's like can be helpful, right? If you think about it, if someone had only ever read PDFs by me, but then I was pitching them on the notion of sign up for a coaching or a course, they might be like, but wait, I don't understand. It doesn't, there's a disconnect there. So this is a taste of what they'll get to some extent. Also, as a general rule, assuming that you're not a complete glass bowl, more exposure to you will mean that people are more likely to buy. When I was the first year when I was in a mastermind, someone made the comment, more Bobby means they'll buy more. In other words, the more time people spent with me, the more likely they are to buy. Same thing with you. And so if you think about it, these types of freebies, whether it's a video or audio course, is giving you a chance to spend time with them virtually or giving them a chance to spend time with you. So when they've done that and been exposed to you more and kind of really had, more time with you, they will tend to be more likely to convert. And so, that's an issue here. So especially for higher ticket people, et cetera. Now, the other reason why these tend to work better for higher ticket, I don't have this concern, but a lot of people worry about giving too much away on their freebie. Well, if you're a coach, I don't think you're going to be worried that doing a 5-part mini course is going to give away all your value. And so that's why it can be very useful. Now, if you're going to create a video course, you'll have to use some kind of online course platform for the video. You'll have to have a hosting and figure that out. There's a lot of different options out there. If, for example, you're building your business on Kajabi, you can just build a course in Kajabi that does it. Again, same thing. If whatever it is, just understand you have to have that platform to host this. Now, theoretically, you could put them just on, all the lessons on a single page on your website somewhere, but understand people are judging you. They're looking at this and judging, the quality of your work, et cetera. So if you're going to be using a course platform to build something that you're ultimately selling, that's where you would house these free video courses. Now, audio, you can do these a couple of ways. You could just do downloadable MP3s, or you could do a private podcast feed. This is something that's relatively new. We use Hello Audio, which is an app that allows you to have, depending on the plan, either one or multiple private podcast feeds that people can sign up for. You can decide how people get access and then give them access to it. And when they do it, it'll literally just download into their standard, the podcast player they use to listen to podcasts on kind of a regular basis. So that's an easy way to deliver these audio types of courses. It's a paid application, but we love it. We'll have a link in the show notes because it's what we use. And we're going to use it for a lot of other things. We use it right now for the delivery of the audio versions of BOMU, but we have some other ideas for other things that we'll be delivering through that platform as well. So that's video and audio courses. These can be a good addition. They're a bigger investment. This generally is not going to be your first freebie out of the gate, but some people decide to try it. But just understand that, it's going to take more work from you and a bigger commitment from them. Now, the last type of lead magnet I want to talk about, I'm grouping two together. I'm calling it quizzes and assessments. What I'll tell you is, if you spend any time in the online world, you've heard all the buzz about quizzes. Oh, quizzes are the cheapest leads. And you hear about this, and people talk about all the quizzes that people take on BuzzFeed? I don't know if it's BuzzFeed, but they'll talk about all of this stuff. And what I'll tell you is, quizzes can be great. When it fits your circumstances, quizzes can be one of the ways to get some of the least expensive leads out there if you're running ads to it. But what I'll tell you, I just want to give you a caveat here. Most people never manage to make a quiz work. I've tried 18 ways, to create quizzes, and I'll talk about where we've used quizzes, where they have worked. But for front end list building, we have never been able to make a quiz work in my business. And what I'll tell you is, I know many friends who are in the same boat. And just so you know, I've invested, I've worked with multiple different quiz people who know what they're doing, and we couldn't make it work. And the same with some of my friends. It's not that we didn't do it right. It's that it was not a good fit for what we were doing. Now, when I was talking about thinking through your audience and that guiding your freebie and the type of freebie, this is where it comes in. A quiz works where what people are interested in is self-discovery. In other words, the big piece of value for them is learning something about themselves. And if that's the case, it can be great. Now, if you think about this, these are great. Just think about like the Myers-Briggs assessment for personality assessment, like knowing that I'm an ENFP. Oh, I want to know that information, and that's interesting, and it helps me know things about myself, right? So that's the type of thing you're like, oh, well, that makes sense. That's a quiz. And some people try to address this by just making the quiz fun. But what I'll tell you is, if people aren't interested in self-discovery, telling them, like what rock star they would be as an online marketer, I don't think that's going to be helpful. Because that's not really what they want. What they want is for you to tell them how to actually do the work. And so that's the thing. It is this fine line. But an important rule is, you shouldn't create a quiz for the sake of creating a quiz. You should create a quiz where what your people want is to learn something about themselves. And the other thing I want you to warn you about is that quizzes can be very involved to create. You're going to create multiple like results pages or results PDFs. Now, some of that can be like the same from one to the other, but for it really to be valuable, you have to, create a lot of content that's very valuable, like for people that they can really consume. So there's a lot of different things going on. Then you've got to figure out what are the questions and how are you going to bucket people. And there's different ways. Like, some people will tell you literally the results are based on an answer to a single question. Some people make it more complicated, but you have to think through all of that logic and how do you do those things. You're going to have standalone software that you really can only use for a quiz. So you're going to have to invest in software that, if you can't make quizzes work, doesn't do you much good, because you now have a quiz software that you bought that you can't use for anything else. So there's a lot of problems here. Now, again, I'm not saying don't do it. I'm simply saying you need to go into this with your eyes open when you're doing it. Now, I want to give a caveat here, because all this that I've said about quizzes right now was talking about quizzes and the value that they might have for getting people onto my list. Where we have had success with quizzes, and I know a lot of people have had this type of success with quizzes and assessments, isn't as a front-end list building tool, but instead using them as a way to nurture existing leads. In other words, you have it and you're sending your existing audience to take a quiz to learn something about themselves, to go deeper. We did this when I was first launching my email marketing course. We created a quiz that was like, I forgot what it was called, but it was like discover your email marketing map assessment. And it was basically, we would tell you, you were going to get a 4-letter code, kind of like your MBTI, but different. I mean, based on the type of emails and email sequences you should be sending based on your business. Trying to send cold traffic there didn't work well, but we sent our existing audience. So we sent an email to my existing people and invited them to take that. Got great response. People loved it. And then here was the kicker on the confirmation page, or once they got their results, we invited them to a webinar. And I think like 60% or more of the people who got to that point signed up for the webinar. So it was a very valuable tool to help people who were already in my world take the next step. I've heard a lot of people using quizzes and assessments in this way. We are toying with the idea of how do we create an assessment to help people figure things out. Like, it's not about list building, but to help people figure out what legal templates they need to buy. So that's where these can fit in with me in my world. But I just want you to understand, when you think about quizzes and assessments, it might not be that they are a good front-end list building, but they are useful for kind of helping to nurture people. So that's one possibility for you to be aware of. But I'll just say, if you're going to use them for a front end, just be aware that it may not work and be open to trying different things. So that's kind of it. That's the different kinds of lead magnets. We went through kind of the simple PDFs, so checklists and guides, templates. Those two are, for most people, will be where a lot of people spend most of their time creating those kinds of lead magnets. Then we talked about white papers and ebooks, which are the more involved types of PDFs. Then you've got video and audio courses. Again, a different kind of delivery can be useful if that's what your audience wants. And then quizzes and assessments can be useful, but I'm just going to be honest with you, it's going to take a lot of work, and they are hit or miss, has been my personal experience with it. So that's it for this episode. This has been a big episode where we talked about list building, and we talked about kind of the ins and outs, and hopefully you've kind of gotten a good sense of how to create a great lead magnet. Now, now that we've covered this, in next week's episode, we're going to be talking about kind of the next piece, which is how do you get people to sign up for your lead magnets? And that is by creating a high converting opt-in page. This is where people go to sign up. We're going to talk about that next week. I'm going to give you kind of the parameters, what to be thinking about, and how to create that. And once we get done with that next week, you will have gone through kind of the list building series here in the inbound journey, and you'll be ready to go. So that's it for this week, and I'll see you again next week. That's it for this episode of the Certified Badass Online Marketing Podcast. Make sure to tune in next time. And in the meantime, go out and build the badass business of your dreams.